Now let's do a few more things here in our CSS. I'm going to create a new comment here that will lay out a section because this is a new page, just like Portfolio. And we'll say page about. There we go. And under about, I'm going to say profile photo, because that's the class that we specified earlier. I'm going to set the display to block, and I'll explain that in a moment. I'm going to set the max width to 150 pixels, a margin of 0 on the top, auto on the left and right, and 30 on the bottom, and then a border radius of 100%. Setting this to display block will allow us to use auto margins to center the element on the page, as we've done here, similar to our wrapper div. By default, images are display inline, but we don't want this image to be displayed in line with the rest of the text. We want it to be display block and actually take up space on the page with a width and height. Now, you might be thinking, if this is display inline by default, similar to text, why don't we just align it center using the text align property? Well, we could try to do that, but that wouldn't give us as much flexibility later on when we build the desktop layout. So we want a little bit more flexibility by setting this to display block and using the margin auto technique to center it on the page. The max width of 150 pixels just sets a max width as the term implies. It's okay if it gets smaller than that, but I don't want it to get any larger. Finally, we've used a new property called border radius. The border radius property allows you to add rounded corners to an element. You can use pixels here, but I've chosen to use a percentage value instead, and I've set the percentage to 100%. That will make our corners so round that in fact our picture will just be a circle instead of a square. So let's save it, switch over to our browser, and refresh the page. And as you can see, the picture is now a circle. Just so that you can get an idea of what border radii looks like when it's not set to this odd 100% value, let's set it to 20 pixels, save that, and refresh. And as you can see, instead of a square image, I have these nice little rounded corners. However, when we set it to that 100% value, the corners just become so wide and rounded that it just becomes a circle. So each of these 4 curves here are actually the corners of the picture. Now, let's add one last piece of styling to this page. I want to style the H3, but I'm not going to put it under the About section. I'm actually going to put it under General Styling because this H3 will be applied to other pages later on. So let's set a margin of 0, 0, 1em, and 0. So the top is 0, the right is 0, the bottom is 1em, and then the left is 0. This will zero out the margins on the H3 element and add some margin to the bottom so that it just separates it from other text a little bit more. So if we switch back and watch this H3 here, you can see that the spacing is just slightly different. And if for some reason the padding were incorrect here, it would go ahead and give it some nice separation regardless. So although it doesn't look like much of a visual change occurred, it's basically just an insurance policy to make sure that About is always separated along with any other H3 elements. This will also be more apparent when we get to our desktop layout. By default, browsers and most CSS resets will add margins to headline elements, but we don't want the H3 to push other elements out of the way by too much, so we've reset them. After a quick code challenge, we'll style the contact page.